you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss. She jumped in on me. Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. And now you do it, young lady. I don't think it's going to hit me. There you go. There you go. Too many buttons to push all at once. Welcome to the show, my family and friends. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. That'll go on the blooper reel for future shows. As always, we have the most amazing guests on the shows with amazing stories, the great authors, the Pulitzer Prize winners, the astronauts, the CEOs, the billionaires, all the people who bring their stories of life and journeys, share them on you to entertain you and also improve the quality of your life. In the meantime, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Get them in on the action. As our current guest was talking to me before the show in the green room, he goes, "You're a very busy man." And we put out 2 to 3 shows a weekday, sometimes 4. And 10 to 15 plus shows a week. If you can't find something to entertain you on this damn show, man, I don't know what to tell you. You're not listening right. Maybe check your earplugs for weevils or something. Do weevils go into earplugs? I don't know. We'll have legal check on that. Anyway, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, and Tickety Talkety for the Chris Voss over there. Zenith, man. Death, love, and redemption in a Georgia courtroom came out February 20th, 2024 is the new book. And we're going to be talking with the author today about it. McCracken Poston Jr. is going to be with us on the show. And we're going to be talking about his amazing book and this story that seems like it might be fiction, but as they always say, truth is stranger than fiction. So we'll get into this nuance of the book. McCracken Poston Jr. is a criminal defense attorney and former state legislator in the Georgia House of Representatives. He gained national attention for his handling of several notable cases that were featured on CNN Presents, Dateline NBC, A&E's American Justice and Forensic Files. He lives in Georgia. Welcome to the show, Mr. McCracken. Mr. Poston, how are you?
Thank you. I have to go to 2 different places at will call to look for my tickets all the time.
Do you really? They get those mixed up?
They do.
What I keep thinking of is that dude with the driver's license. Do you know the movie that I'm talking about? McLovin. Yeah, McCracken McLovin. There you go. So give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Mostly at McCrackenPostonJr.com is my book site. On Twitter, it's at Real Zenith Man.
There you go.
And then Facebook and the other things, it's McCracken Poston Jr.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview of this book and what's inside of it.
It's a true story that I think is a cautionary tale about a rush to judgment in a small town. And a lot has to do with the time period. In 1999, when this trial happened, there was very little known about adult autism. I only learned 3 years ago that my client in the case is indeed autistic.
Oh, wow.
And that explained so much about the case, about the reason he seemed suspicious. But his very autistic mannerisms were actually used against him at trial.
Oh, wow.
His flat effect on the 911 call, by his people observing him, a mismatch between the moment and his emotions about the moment.
There you go.
And then he kept grudges from childhood as if they just happened that week. He was an extremely difficult client that I had to fight with. But then every now and then something like a divine intervention would happen. He was obsessed with ancient civil litigation. And I would say, we need to talk about this murder case. And he would say, no, we don't, because I didn't kill her. But the county did take my van. And so that was his logic that I had to fight all the time.
I mean, it must have been a nice van. So there you go. So how did you get involved in this case? I mean, I think you've alluded that you were the attorney on the case. How did you get involved in this case?
It's a small town, and the difference in small southern towns especially is we know all our eccentrics. We pretty much know them all. Mm-hmm. What we didn't know was that there was a woman in Alvin's house who never came out in almost 3 decades, and that was his wife.
Wow.
They married in 1966, just 3 weeks in the same place, got their license in the same place that Dolly Parton and Carl Dean got their marriage license in Ringgold, Georgia in 1966. Mm-hmm. By the time George Jones and Tammy Wynette renewed their vows in Ringgold, Georgia in 1969, Virginia Ridley had disappeared.
Huh.
Her family pushed every way. They put articles in the local newspaper, in the Chattanooga, Tennessee newspaper, about their missing married daughter. Ultimately, they were factors behind an eviction, which ended up in a jury trial. And on September 15, 1970, Virginia Ridley made her last public appearance in the Catoosa County courtroom, basically saying, "I'm with my husband. That's where I want to be."
Wow.
Her family, her parents, kind of backed off at that point. But 27 years later, when Virginia turns up dead, her siblings, and I think understandably, revived all of the rumor mills about they thought that Alvin Ridley had kept his wife from being seen by anyone.
So some control there maybe. But it basically turns out, how did they find that she's passed away in his house?
He told her that he told the 911 operator what he called it was she's epileptic. And of course that meant she had epilepsy.
Yeah.
And she did from childhood. Mm-hmm. She had stopped taking her medicine 20 years before. So she was not medicating, making her vulnerable to that. There was a question at first of why wasn't she taking her medicine? Why didn't she go to the doctor? Why didn't she do all of these things? And these were questions that I was concerned with. Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, Alvin was so difficult, he would not let me have access to his house or his shuttered Zenith television business that had been shuttered for 15 years. Mm-hmm. He let the police go in both buildings anytime they wanted to and multiple times, but he would not let his lawyer. And so there was just an issue that I had to figure out how to work with him. And it was the divine intervention again of my parents sending a turkey plate on Thanksgiving and telling me they wanted me to take it to Alvin Ridley. When I showed up with the turkey plate, I realized that he's so transactional that he felt like he needed to give me something. So he invited me into his home.
Wow.
And so this was Thanksgiving of 1998.
And he's free on bail at this time. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. When I remind him that I got him out of jail within 24 hours, he corrects me 26 hours.
Well,
he's a very demanding client. So when I get access to this house on Thanksgiving, I'm not really prepared. I didn't expect him to invite me in, but I took advantage of the opportunity. And as I adjusted my eyes, it's a very uncomfortable house to be in. Yeah. My eyes started focusing on one wall. And just about every way you could attach paper to a wall, there was a wall covered with writings. Different types of paper. And as I focused in on it, I said, "Alvin, who wrote this?" It seemed to be all in the same very unique hand. He said, "Virginia did." Well, it was poetry. It was reports of things going on in the community. It was the cast of the CBS show, The Waltons. It was just all types of just random stream of thought, things that she wrote down that I got too excited, perhaps, because this was the mystery woman, and I wanted to use this stuff. And Alvin said, "It's all I have left of her. You can't use it."
Wow, man.
So ultimately, I had to pay him $200 to borrow it to make copies for the prosecutor with the understanding that we would discuss actually using it later.
Yeah, and you're his attorney trying to say. Now, how does it end up that they think there's foul play involved and they put him up, I assume, for murder?
The state of Georgia pathology report. First, the body was delivered to the state crime lab by a local coroner who passed along the local rumor that was unsubstantiated. She said to the state medical examiner, "This woman has been locked in a basement for 30 years." And I'm thinking that influenced his decision. He looked at the petechial hemorrhages around the eyes and the lips of the deceased and indicated he thinks that maybe she was strangled or smothered. And now Alvin
that could be from an epileptic seizure attack, right?
Exactly. Alvin maintained that she had a seizure in the night and that he found her face down. And if you're having a seizure and you are face down in the bed, that is one way you can suffocate yourself. At the same time, Alvin was difficult. And what I needed was an example of an epilepsy death. And thankfully, we don't have as many epilepsy deaths as we used to because of good medication. But just interestingly enough and tragically, in September, before the January trial, the Olympic track star Florence Griffith Joyner passed away. And by October, it came out in the news that she died of a seizure disorder. So I got her autopsy to compare it to Virginia Ridley's autopsy. Now, the most famous athlete in the world dying, and it was a very exacting autopsy because there was always people that did not want to acknowledge this athlete's sheer greatness, always tried to suggest that there were performance enhancing drugs. The only thing in FloJo was Benadryl and a therapeutic level of Benadryl. And yet the condition of her body was very relevant because that was a first class autopsy. The most famous person in the world, I was comparing it to arguably the least known woman in the world and her autopsy. And the bodies looked alike. The bodies looked the same in terms of petechial hemorrhages, tardo spots, etc.
There you go. This is wild. This guy is fighting his attorney. He's charging you for stuff. You've got to, barter with him to try and save him from the, potentially death row.
It was not a death sentence, but any sentence would have been a life sentence for him. And it was extremely difficult. As it turned out, only 3 years ago, and this is what finally formed the book in my head, that I learned that my client Alvin is autistic. Now, there are 5.5 million adults with autism that are undiagnosed. And I guarantee any official interaction that they're having with an investigation or perhaps with a judge, they are not going to satisfy their inquisitor. They're going to take literally every question, and they're not going to be able to respond to a question that isn't literal. And we speak in riddles sometimes. And so I like to think of it this way, that Alvin was having difficulty processing me, the investigators, everyone, but we also were having issues in processing him and the way he communicated. And so it was really just like turning on the light in a room to realize that Alvin is autistic. It explained his flat effect on the 911 call, which was used against him at trial.
Because he was very calm and non-emotional.
It explained the lack of expected emotion to the moment, which, Alvin absorbs the emotion in a room, and he did when my parents died. And then there'll be a release. There'll be a meltdown at some point. But it's very much goes with autism. And I hope that my book helps perhaps cause police officers to be trained better to screen for that, or state psychologists or judges.
Yeah. I have friends that have autistic kids. They respond differently. They close themselves off if they get too much stimuli. it varies on the spectrum, but the responses can be just logical with no emotion, or vice versa. I mean, it just depends. And yeah, I could see how there could be people probably on prison or death row that got there because, as you said, it's not only are we having a hard time understanding, they're having a hard time understanding us, and everything's lost in the middle, and giving them the presumption of suspicion rather than innocence can just make things look awful. So yeah, it makes me wonder how many people might be in jail over this.
Another interesting fact is I brought in the world's biggest expert on sudden death and epilepsy, Dr. Braxton Bryant Wanamaker of Orangeburg, South Carolina, where, just as an aside, after taking him to dinner the night before I put him on the stand, as an aside, he said, "Is there anything else unusual about this woman?" And I said, I found what I estimate to be 15,000 entries in this loose leaf journal that went over 30 years. And I said, yeah, she wrote down everything. And he calmly said, "That's hypergraphia. That happens in some of my patients, usually temporal lobe epilepsy." And he said, it doesn't affect what she writes. It just tells her to write it down, and it compels her to write it down. And so that was fascinating because she dated some of the writings. Some could be dated by what she talked about. The first moon landing, the second moon landing, the presidents. She wrote President Richard M. Nixon about the couple being evicted from public housing. He responded through the HUD secretary, who referenced her letter to Richard Nixon. She wrote congressmen and senators. They had for every ounce of suspicion they had about local government, and they had pounds of suspicion about local government. There was a counterweight of hope from the federal government. It was very unusual.
And they were just two eclectic individuals. Maybe she may have been on the spectrum. I don't know. But they're just two eclectic individuals who like their privacy. They don't like the world messing with them. Like I said, I have lots of autistic friends. They like to do their own thing because, they see us as the abnormal ones.
Absolutely.
They're like, you guys are the ones who have problems. We're fine. We understand what we're doing.
And I feel equally responsible for the communication problems.
Yeah.
And even at trial, and by the way, I did not plan on putting Alvin on the stand because I thought, how bad would it be that I'm asking him about his wife and he wants to talk about this van that was taken in 1984. And so
it's a nice van, though.
I decided I'm not going to put him up.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Jesus appeared to him during lunch one day, and he came and told me, he said, "Jesus told me you got to put me up." And so who am I going to argue with that? So I tried to prepare him. And by the way, he insisted on keeping the evidence in these giant old suitcases. Along with the evidence, he brought scores of cockroaches into the courtroom.
Oh, geez.
It infested the courtroom. One of the people on Forensic Files, the jurors, mentions this scene. And the judge finally said, "Mr. Poston, we're finishing this trial in the other courthouse in the old courtroom." That was the last place Virginia was seen 27 years before. And it was eerie. Going back into the courtroom, the last place she had ever been seen in public, and here are her writings.
Man, this has got to go on Dateline and 48 Hours, all those shows, right? I mean, this just sounds like a hell of a job.
But it was very frustrating. I did not know at the time what was making Alvin tick and what was making him so antagonistic toward me.
Yeah, and you're the guy who's fighting for his freedom.
And now I realize some of it was my attitude and my frustration with him and how he was reacting to it.
Maybe you should host things for attorneys on how to identify, and law enforcement, how to identify people on the spectrum, and how they maybe don't do the thing. But this definitely sounds like a great story in all the annals and stuff. Does he end up? Do you want to tease out on what happens in the book? I mean, it's technically a real story, so
no, I don't mind because there's plenty of story in there. But Alvin was acquitted.
There you go.
And I was so thrilled because by the time the trial was ending, I was realizing that he is indeed innocent, and in fact innocent. And it just made me kind of shudder to think of all the people who have not. Now, I think as time goes on, that number of undiagnosed people is going to dwindle because we're catching autism in schools now.
Yeah.
And either they're being diagnosed in schools or parents are referred for a diagnosis somewhere. And we've had autistic people since humanity began. And they've been some of our greatest contributors to science and art. And Alvin was a hell of a TV repairman. Yeah. But that was been the picture tube era.
Yeah.
The solid state circuitry came along about the time that his business failed. TVs were no longer giant pieces of beautiful wooden furniture that you had to get a repairman to come to you to fix. Now, as he laments, you just throw them away. Alvin will be 82 in a week.
Wow.
And we go to lunch twice a week religiously on Mondays and Thursdays. Trust me, he's very exact. And I feel...
Let you know if you're late by...
Absolutely. And I feel very fortunate to have him as my friend.
There you go. Working on Zenith TVs, that echoes... what was the movie Sling Blade? One of my favorite movies. Such great acting in that movie.
Yeah, Carl.
Yep, Carl. Yeah.
He's very
got no gas in it.
He's very Carl-like.
Oh, really? Oh, there you go. They on the website, on the Amazon billing, they bill it as a nonfiction like nonfiction John Grisham thriller, but that goes to Rainman, Just Mercy, and captivating small town southern settling. But
let me just tell you, don't go to John Grisham for a blurb. His agent told me off, saying, don't send stuff to us because people will then accuse us of taking their ideas. And I kind of got it after he told me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm thinking, ease up, buddy.
Just calm your jets there a little bit.
This is nonfiction. It actually happened. It didn't just spring from my mind.
He writes so many books, I can see that. VCs have to do the same thing in Silicon Valley. They won't sign an NDA because they get so many different variations of an idea. But yeah. The
reason I wanted Grisham was that, like me, he grew up in the South. Like me, he worked on a road crew when he was a teenager in the county. Like me, he served in the state legislature. And like me, his first book was nonfiction.
Oh, well, there you go. So this is interesting. And the man survives. The man lives a unique life. Him and his wife, they don't go out and hang out with other people. I mean, this was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I don't want to hang out with people now. I don't like going out in public.
Virginia was very much plugged into popular culture, as evidenced by her writings. And there was a couple of very critical pieces of evidence that I wasn't sure Alvin was going to bring or allow me to use. Wow. And one, I called it the Rosetta Stone, because in it, she described the trouble she was having with her family, the fact that she never liked to go out, and the fact that she spoke to our sheriff. And she mentioned the sheriff that was our sheriff in the 70s. And so that covered a period of time that, we know she wasn't being held captive in the basement.
There you go. Man, does she have a sister? I mean, a woman who doesn't want to go out all the time, spend money. I mean, that sounds like a gold mine right there for me. I mean, of course, I don't know. Nowadays, they sit home and play and bring in everything on Amazon. So
they were the perfect couple, as it turns out.
Sounds like they were a perfect couple. They had a nice life, and
by the way, she wrote in a Bible, September of 1977. God told me today to stop taking my medicine. In this wonderland of a house are a bunch of empty medicine bottles that we used at trial.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly in September of 1977, for several months, they are filled medicine bottles. So Alvin was still trying to give her and go out and get her the medicine. But
he's trying to get her to take him, and she's like,
she refused to take it.
I had a girlfriend like that. She had Cushing's disease, which is cancer in the pituitary gland. She didn't want to take her medicine. And it's like you're a much better person when you take it, but that's another story. So what does he think about this? You go have lunch with him twice a week. What's his thoughts on the success of this book, and the story, and does he want to see it maybe on film or TV, or does he care?
By Alvin's manner of speech, you feel like you're going back to your childhood. So just the things that he says and the phrasings that he uses. It's to me, it's like visiting my childhood again. Wow. And I remembered a moment from my childhood where I had an encounter with Alvin. I wore the tuner knob off of our TV when I was a kid. Oh, wow. My sisters and I did. Mm-hmm. And my father sends him to the house with a new one. My mother waved him on in the house. I'm about 13. I'm watching live wrestling. And all of a sudden, there's this strange man in my living room holding the TV tuner knob. And he gives me about a 20-minute instruction on how to change channels on a TV set. But I remembered it because he noticed I was watching live wrestling, and he told me about meeting Andre the Giant. He told me what Andre the Giant had for breakfast, as told to him by Andre the Giant, which was outrageous, the number of eggs and loaves of bread. And I remember going and telling all my friends at school that I knew somebody who knew Andre the Giant, and here's what he ate for breakfast. During the representation for the murder trial, he tells me the same story, and I said, You're the guy. You're the guy that told me this when I was 13, because I became the guy that relayed it to Ringgold Junior High.
There you go. What a thing in a small Georgia town. This sounds like a very serious version of what was the one with the Jersey and the little guy, the mafia guy from whatchamacallit. They go to some southern town and
Cousin Vinny.
My Cousin Vinny. It's like a serious version of My Cousin Vinny.
Inverse My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah, inverse. Yeah, there you go. There you go. This has been fun to have you on. Give us your .coms, your final thoughts as people go out. Tell them where to buy the book, et cetera, et cetera.
The book is on all platforms. It may be in bookstores as well, but it's on all platforms for ordering. It is the Zenith man with the kissing couple on the cover. That's Alvin in Virginia in an amusement park photo booth in 1965.
Wow.
And so they used to get out. And it's to distinguish it from any other Zenith man that's out there, including one that is our story that someone put out as fiction. TV repairman with a wife nobody's seen in 3 decades.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of frustrating, but this is the title that I gave New Line Cinema when they were considering a movie about it 20 years ago. And I retained literary rights, and there is no copyright in title. So I will credit that author with making me get off my butt to finally write this story.
The truth comes out. This would make a great movie, man. This would make a great movie. And Amazon, and there's so many places that make great movies. Maybe you can get Billy Bob Thornton to play the thing. And he did really great in what was it, Goliath on Amazon? If you ever saw that.
No, I haven't.
He's such a great actor, but in Sling Blade, he was just iconic. There you go. I guess I'll have some fries with that. Yeah. There you go. Thank you very much for coming on the show. We certainly appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. And thanks so much for tuning in. Order of the book where refined books are sold, and check out the amazing story. Say you were able to read it first before they go muck it up on TV or movies or whatever. And I don't know, they add they always do something with books that take them off course. Zenith Man, Death, Love, and Redemption in Georgia Courtroom, out February 20th, 2024. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTokity, and Chris Voss, Facebook.com. Be good to each other, stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time. And that should have